Hi, this is Matt, and today I want to talk a little bit about Burja Mapping. So Burja Mapping is created by Tasshin Fogleman from the Monastic Academy. And the idea behind it is to take the principles of Samo Burja's empire theory and apply the visual mapping process of a worldly map to that theory. So to just break that down a little bit, the idea of worldly mapping is to map out an industry or a set of practices, a set of patterns, etc. By on the y-axis. Let's see if I can highlight this. On the y-axis here, they show the value chain. That is, how do you progressively add things to finally give value to the customer up here. And then on the x-axis, they show the evolution, which is looking at, okay, over time, how do things evolve? And so the worldly map here plots those things and then shows the relationship between all the things. And you can see how, as things move, it will affect other things in the map. Now, the Burja mapping also has the y and x-axis. So if you look at the x-axis here, and this is, again, from Tasshin's blog post. If you look at the x-axis here, it shows the amount of power that a particular entity has in a domain or in an empire where people are competing for scarce resources. If you look at the y-axis here, actually, I think I'm getting the x-axis and y-axis confused. That's okay. Then it's the vitality. That is, how likely is somebody likely to do a new thing within this empire? How likely is somebody to try a new tactic, get a new result, etc., etc.? And knowing these things are very useful. Now, the thing that I had trouble with when I was trying to use Burja mapping, that worldly mapping does, that Burja mapping does not, is it shows the relationships between things. So I know when I make a specific move on a specific piece in the component, I can visually look at, okay, how is that going to affect other components in the system. So that's what I've added to Burja mapping. So here's an example of the same map. We've got power on the left. We've got vitality on the bottom. We've got this middle portion, which shows basically live, where people are basically doing new things, and dead, where people find it really hard to do new things. And then we've got all of the players within this empire. What I've added here are these lines, these black and pink lines. And the idea here is I'm mapping out two types of relationships in this Burja map. So the black lines represent power. That is, how can I tell somebody else in the organization what to do? So you can also think of this in some sense as your org chart, or a big portion of this is going to be your org chart. And then you've got like other things here that aren't in your organization at all, but are still in the empire. So the black lines represent power. So the CEO gets to tell the CTO what to do, and the CTO may get to tell the IT department what to do, etc. So if I can tell somebody else what to do based on the rules of the empire, then that's a black line. Now the pink lines represent influence. Now influence is is that person likely to know, like, and trust me enough for me to be able to influence what they do. I can't tell them what to do. They don't have to do what they do. But are they likely to choose what to do based on knowing, liking, and trusting me, and me being able to influence them in that way? So a few interesting things about this. The first thing you should notice is that the black lines always go down from the top because this axis represents power. So power always goes from the top down in an organization, or 99% of the time. Whereas the pink lines can go sideways and up. So if you want to create a change and you are lower than the area that you want to create the change, you're going to have to utilize these pink lines, these lines of influence. Another thing you're going to notice is that I can almost always go from a pink line to a black line, but I can't if I'm trying to create a chain of power and influence. It's much harder to go from a black line to a pink line. That is, the CEO can tell the CFO to tell the head of strategy to do something. Okay, that is a valid chain of influence. It's much harder for the CEO to tell the CFO to influence the CDO. Even if the CFO has a line of influence to the CDO, you can't force somebody to influence somebody else. You can only influence somebody to influence somebody else. So when you're doing these changes and trying to figure out how you're going to get the changes that you're looking for made, or stop the changes that you're looking for to stop, you have to keep that in mind. You can go from influence to power. I can influence the CIO to tell the IT department to do something, but I can't tell the CIO to influence somebody, because that's not how power works. I can't tell somebody to use their influence. I can only influence them to use their influence. So that's the second thing to know. The third thing you really want to be on the lookout here is anytime that you see two separate power lines going to the same node. So the IT department here, I put it that both the head of operations and the CIO have power over the IT department. In a sense, in this map, the IT department has two bosses. And that's going to be a much harder, that's where you end up with power struggles. And that's going to be a much harder line to influence. So, if possible, you want to avoid trying to go through lines of power where there are power struggles, where there are two separate lines of power influencing the same node. So what you can do with this is you can look at, okay, what change do I want to get made? And then you can look at, okay, what lines of power and influence can I take to get that change made? And then if I have competitors or people against those changes, what lines are they likely to take to try and block me? And how can I preempt? How can I cut off one of those lines of influence or power? And you also want to pay attention here to the vitality. So if I'm trying to influence somebody to do something or tell somebody to do something, is it something that their vitality allows them to do? In other words, if it's really, really new and out there for them, they better be really, really to the light. Whereas if they're really far to the left, I can do things, only basically things that they're already used to doing. And so I can follow these chains of influence if I want to influence if I want to influence the CIO to tell the IT department, to influence the head of operations, to influence the CEO, to understand that this is open source, I can find those lines and make that happen. So that's my update to Burja Mapping, by showing the relationships between things using power and influence. You can start to create much more dynamic plans. Hope you enjoyed.